and salutations, all you canoodlers of the cosmos out there, and welcome to More Than Meets the Eye, where we're uncovering the conspiracy fact the government doesn't want you to know about. I'm your host, Alexander Sorochan, and this week we're doing something a little bit different than we normally do. For the last 5 episodes, we've been mainly discussing the visitation of unknown life forms to our humble little rock in space that we call Earth. This week, however, we're taking a look at a story where we're the ones doing the visiting. If you've been paying attention to the news at all the last couple weeks, you've most likely heard about the great strides us humans have been making towards the exploration of Mars. Perseverance, along with its little buddy, the Ingenuity helicopter, have not only managed to pull off the first powered flight by the human race on an extraterrestrial planet, but also pull oxygen from the atmosphere for future use. This is all in hopes of finding proof of ancient life on Mars. To talk more about these fascinating advancements, we've brought in Dr. Chris Hurd, PhD, a member of the mission and professor at the University of Alberta, to offer us a clearer picture of what this all means. Welcome, Dr. Hurd. To start us off, why don't you tell us a bit about what your job on the mission is?
I am what's called a return sample scientist for the mission. I'm on the mission as one of 14 people who were kind of competed for a spot to be on the mission, and our job is to help decide where and when and what samples to collect. Because of course, one of the major things this rover is going to do is to drill core samples, put them in sealed sleeves, and at certain points in the mission, leave them on the surface for future missions to pick up and return to the Earth.
So what exactly are you looking for in these samples?
The main driver for this mission is finding evidence for ancient life. So we've landed in a crater that was once filled with water up to maybe 200 meters depth, probably about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, when Mars was warmer and wetter at the surface, and there was a river system that flowed into it. And so all of this, what I'm describing, is what we call a habitable environment, because if it existed on the Earth, it would be full of life. So even 3.5 billion years ago, it might have had life in it if it existed on the Earth. So that's the question that we're trying to answer: was life actually there on Mars at that time? So the rocks that we are going to target mainly are going to be those that are things like mudstones, or from the bottom of the lake, or things near the edge of the lake where we think the best environment was where life could have existed. There could be organic matter, so basically the organic material that from the decay of organisms that could have been preserved or encapsulated within some of these rocks. Another possibility is that we have preserved microfossils. So we think that the life would have been microbial, so single-celled life, and it may have been fossilized at that time, or maybe a bit of both. Both together. There may also be certain structures that we know existed at 3.5 billion years ago on the Earth that microbial life built up, called stromatolites, that are almost like they're fossils essentially, but they're from this microbial life. And so if we find something like that, that would be a very strong indicator that life actually existed. But what I think is important to note is that even if we do find something like that, the samples are going to be really key, because there are lots of things in nature on the Earth that look like maybe what life has made, but doesn't necessarily require life. So having the samples with the context back in labs on the Earth, where we can throw everything that we have at these to really answer that question, is going to be really important.
Then when can we expect to see these samples return to Earth?
Well, we're going to rove around for the next several years, up to 7 or 8 years, if everything goes well. And at the end of that time, or at certain times within the mission, we're going to put a depot down, or a cache of samples down. So we'll probably put a cache down in 2 or 3 years' time, and then we'll continue on and probably put another cache down in 7 or 8 years' time. But by 2028, we need to get these caches down on the ground, because in 2028, the plan is for another rover to come along and collect up one of the samples from one of the 2 caches and gather them up, put them in a capsule, blast them off the surface of Mars to rendezvous with another spacecraft in orbit around Mars and bring it back to the Earth for return to Earth no earlier than 2031.
So I saw that just recently as well, you were able to pull oxygen out of the Martian atmosphere. Can you explain a little bit more about that process?
Yes, that's really exciting. So that's an instrument on board the rover called MOXIE. And what it does is it compresses down carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere and pushes it into this ceramic material that then splits off oxygen basically from the carbon dioxide. And in the space of an hour, this was the first time this was run. It's going to run several times throughout the mission, but in the space of about an hour, the MOXIE was able to produce almost 6 grams of pure oxygen. This MOXIE is a scaled down version of what you would need if you want to send humans there, ideally, because oxygen is really important, and so is reducing the amount of mass that you have to launch off the surface of the Earth to take with you. So if you can send a scale up version of MOXIE to the surface of Mars and let it sit there, say for several months or years, generating oxygen, then you have that oxygen available to astronauts that then go to the surface of Mars later to use for breathing as well as for rocket fuel for return trip home type thing activities. So it's a pretty key technology called in situ resource utilization, basically using the resources that are available there to test prior to sending people.
And my last question for you, Dr. Hurd, is do you believe in the existence of extraterrestrial life?
This is essentially what we're trying to test out. If this environment that we are exploring on Mars had life in it, microbial life in it, it opens up the possibility that microbial life is kind of a natural consequence of kind of planetary evolution, as long as sort of liquid water is present, that sort of thing, anywhere where you have a planet, right? With those sorts of conditions, the Goldilocks zone, as they say, the right distance from its star, that sort of thing for liquid water. Intelligent life is a different thing. If you look back at the history of our Earth, we as intelligent beings have only existed here for a very, very short amount of time, and the evolutionary advances, the evolutionary changes, I should say, that led to that have taken place over most of Earth's history. So there's this idea that it could take several billion years for intelligent life to evolve on a planet, and then the question becomes, do we ever overlap with intelligent life? So I'm saying it's possible that it has happened, or maybe could happen in the future. The question is whether it happened, and given the huge distances that exist in the universe for communication, etc., whether it has happened concurrently in different places, for example, concurrently with us, so that we'd be able to communicate with anybody. So long-winded answer to say it's extremely unlikely, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Hurd. The mission sounds fascinating, and I know I'll be paying attention to all the future updates. Just too bad we need to wait for so long for the samples to be returned. But that about does it for this week. Take care, folks, and remember, there's more than meets the eye.